stuff. It's against the commons. Or in
covenants for the Hortonville Business Park, specifically VIB parking, a portion of section 1. All parking lots, walks, and loading zones shall be permanently surfaced with either asphalt or concrete. At least 3% of the total parking lot area shall be landscaped as specified in these covenants. Corner lots may be exempted from setback requirements provided that loading and maneuvering areas are screened from public view by careful building orientation and landscaping. All paving must be completed within 15 months, in addition to the discussion of the covenants in general.
So this was this came up after our planning and zoning passed a recommendation onto the village board, and the village board had some concerns and passed it back down. The idea was to create this joint meeting and have a public hearing with inviting the neighbors and the current business owners in that section. So notices went out to all residents within 500 feet of this street and the parcels in that phase 1 subdivision, or phase 1 industrial park. So, and all businesses that were in the industrial park in phase 1 obviously got letters as well. So the question is whether or not we would like to enforce with the current covenants. Some of the business owners are concerned on the cost that this burden it would put on to them. And I think the village board was trying to look for some type of mitigation between the extremes, I guess, from my recollection. So.
Yes, please identify yourself when you speak.
Gary Bex, WGB Properties, 210 Industrial Park Drive. Nathan indicates that everybody was notified of this meeting. I went up and down Industrial Park Drive on Tuesday night, polled every land owning person on the first parcel of the industrial park. Nobody had any idea of this meeting. No notification sent in the mail, no phone calls. I spoke to every person, business owner, except for the, I don't even know if it is a dance studio anymore, in the far northwest corner.
When did they get mail?
Over a month ago. So
I never got one. I was not notified by mail.
we sent out mailers over a month ago. Whether you got one, I don't know.
So we're saying that nobody on Industrial Park got a mailer? Because I spoke to every business owner on that. I have a hard time believing that the mail or the post office would miss every single mailbox.
I'm not claiming anything. I'm just saying we sent the mailers out.
Okay,
I don't know what to say. Yeah, I can look at and make sure we have copies of everything that was printed and sent out. So,
well, do you have proof that it was taken to the post office? Maybe you should be sending these out register letters, because nobody on Industrial Park between Nye Street and Highway 15 knows anything about this meeting. The only reason I know about about it is because I'm part of this suit, and I've been watching the village board
from the village board back to planning and zoning after we had denied the requests for variances.
I think the business owners, the expenses that it would go to them, I think was concerning. I think a lot of the board members, well, from my understanding, was they wanted to try to work with the business owners to mitigate that, and kind of talk through what the current covenants are in this section and try to figure out either some type of mediation between it or trying to figure out what we want to do with the covenants going forward. So that's my recollection. If any other board member has any other comments with it.
There were some numbers thrown around, like 60,000 and above for expenses for paving. There were also some concerns. Specifically, I remember the algorithm had concerns about their equipment driving over a paved surface and then just destroying it in a very short period of time. And like the Equine Center had some concerns about loading and unloading horses and those types of things on a paved surface rather than a softer surface that they have now. The reason that we pushed it off was because we, as the board, from my recollection, were stuck with a binary choice, right? We had the choice to say either ignore the covenants that we had and ignore the complaints from residents and don't enforce what we don't do any enforcement, which on the one hand puts the village in a very poor position to ever create a covenant and an agreement again, because if we're not going to enforce it, then we're sort of, sort of feckless. So that was the one choice, and the other choice was to fully enforce the covenant and burden the businesses with some very high expenses and inconveniences. So I suggested that we table it for, I think, 120 days and then have a joint meeting. And my hope was, and my suggestion to the business owners at the time was, that they come back to us with some suggestions. I remember I made comments as to like the Equine Center. I went out there that day and I made a comment in the meeting that I know that the area where your employees park can be paved, right? I mean, there's cars parked there. You're not running horses through where your cars are parked. And at the day that I went out there, it was the middle of winter, and the cars, late winter, so it was somewhat melting. So the cars were parked in snowy, muddy, gravel, so I guess the hope was that the business owners could come up with an alternative that meets with the spirit of the agreement, being that the residents are coming forth with complaints that because the lots are unpaved, it's producing hardships on them because of the dust that's blowing, and that we could come up with some sort of a compromise that meets with the spirit of the agreement, that we could all get behind and hopefully reduce the expenses to the business and still meet with the spirit of the agreement.
Proposed subdivision that was going in, that were invited to the meeting to discuss it. And we were not invited to a meeting that addresses us. Okay, so we're starting out with a sour note. How is this happening that we're being left out of these meetings? Because I think we could have come to probably some type of an agreement, or maybe the planning and zoning would have been a little more educated on our side of the story before they made their decision to deny any type of variances and send that to the village board. And I think that I bought my property, maybe you don't know this, I bought my property secondhand. I was not given a covenant book when I purchased the property. So I was unaware of this. I had built my building, and it was, I believe, 2014, when at that time, President, I got it in the packet here, came and talked to me about the amount of tractors I had parked in the front of my building. And, you know, we had agreement that, you know, within 2 weeks I would get that cleaned up and get them put behind the building. Never once did he bring up anything about hard surfacing my property at that time. And, you know, had those things been brought up at that time, blacktop was a lot cheaper back in 2011 when I built that building than it is now. So the town has not done me any favors, I should say the village has not done me any favors by not doing their police work at the beginning. And now, it's good, you know, I rent out my building now. I cannot fix tractors like I used to anymore. I can't do it. So I rent my building, and the minimum bid, the minimum price was $68,000 through my parking lot. That'll be 3 months or 3 years worth of revenue of rent of my building to pay for that. So, you know, and the same thing, you know, Mike Oak from Thompson Metals is not here. He had an agreement. The village board knew that he was not going to pave his whole parking lot when he built that building back in 91, 94, something like that. And you know, last year, yeah, it was a dusty year. It was very dry. So there would be some dust. But you know, when Ryan Martin works land over behind Clegg's, you know, there's a lot of dust that flies through there too. And they're combining harvested crops, there's a lot of dust. It's not all coming from industrial park. And I have asphalt millings in my parking lot, and it is not coming from my parking lot. So the other thing is, you know, how far do we want to push these covenant rules? Because in the same paragraph that we talk about hard surfacing of the property, it also states in that exact same paragraph that there will be no employee parking in the front of or on the side of the buildings. I want to see who's going to go down and tell Skid, Crate and Pallet, Gardan, Globefab, that they're going to have to move their parking lot somewhere else. So, you know, if we're going to enforce one rule, then I guess we're probably going to have to enforce them all. So that's something to take into consideration.
I got a question. You've applied for variances?
We wrote a letter when we originally got our registered letter that was sent to myself, Thompson Metals, Algrim Explosives, the Equine Horse Place, and D&K Storage. It was advised, because I came down to see what was going over there for his storage sheds. There was some talk between, I believe his name was Bob from Skid Crate and Pellet at that time. Is that the original owner?
Yes.
Okay, that he was getting an awful lot of water runoff that was coming alongside the back of his building that's coming from Creasel's property. And now, are we gonna blacktop that and see all the water that's gonna come off of there? And we go look at the gravel that's, I don't know what's the name of that street there that's in between Boss Bags and
Stock.
Skid Crate and Pellet?
Stop.
No, Stock is between Creases. It's the one just to the north of it. There's a lot of gravel on that road from the washout in the last two rainstorms. Just imagine what that's gonna be when that water's really running and the road is underwater. Why? You know, I think if you go and talk to any city, township, village, county, one of their biggest problems that they have is water retention and water runoff. Why do we wanna make it worse? I mean, do you guys wanna set yourself up for problems? City of Appleton's got problems right now with flooded basements and stuff that was happening with those rainstorms. Does the village wanna end up with, you know, lawsuits against them because they don't have a good drainage plan up there? Just things I'm throwing out there. Just to settle you know, a couple little complaints of dust in, you know, that business has been around there for 30 years. You know, and it was okay for the first 30 years and now it's a problem?
Ashley, did you not say that we cannot do variances?
The use of that terminology in the covenants doesn't make any sense to me. And when we looked at these further, that's not my card one. They're for phase 1 and phase 2, the language is written differently. I'm not understanding, one, why there would be this process for a variance. A variance is typically something that's granted when you have a property that you would not be, it would have no useful value unless you received a variance. And so when we look at the covenants, it talks about the ability to amend these covenants with 2/3 of the property owner's consent. And so the conversation, as I recall, was, well, first of all, if the property owners have a 2/3 say, let's get them here. And secondly, let's see if we can work out a solution that would be acceptable to these property owners. I don't think that the village board has the ability to amend these covenants. I think it needs to happen collaboratively with the property owners. And so I hear of this issue with the mailing, and what I'll say is, whatever happened, I don't know about that, but all of these people are here in this room hoping to have that conversation with those property owners. So if those individuals were missed, it certainly wasn't intentional. The purpose of calling this meeting and this hearing was to try and have that conversation, because these individuals don't have the authority to amend those covenants without the property owners present.
So actually, that's what I was just gonna ask. So as the board, we can't amend the covenants without the input of 2/3 of the property owners, correct?
So for
We-
phase one, the
For phase
language
one.
says majority of the property owners and the village board by resolution may amend covenants.
Okay, so
And for phase two, majority of property owners and the village board by resolution. And
That's why.
thank you for catching me. That's why it would be nice for these things to be consistent.
Yeah.
So we have no recourse, we have no option
Not
at
tonight.
this point.
No, not unless
Without-
they're 2/3,
without a
and it doesn't
majority-
sound like they're 2/3 of the.
The majority of the business owners from phase one here. Or documented in writing, I'm assuming that they.
Right. Well, there's no presented resolution either
Yeah.
for tonight to make action. So that's, tonight was more about getting input and then coming with a resolution for approval and then getting the business owners to sign up if they want it. So, yeah.
So what are you suggesting, that we go to next month and try to get these people notified? And,
I don't know. It depends on what you guys want to do. I think my suggestion would be to just basically work on updating our ordinances and the zoning and then eventually removing all the covenants. And taking the covenants you like and basically putting it across on all of the industrial zoned land in the village.
so we can do that on our own, without their input?
Then,
No.
No.
no, not removing, but I'm sure they would probably agree to it being removed. I mean,
Right.
if you changed the zoning code and your zoning code was more strict than this, it goes by the zoning code. So I'm not saying to do it more strict, but I'm just saying, if you created the zoning code, there could be, if the business owners were looking at it, they probably would be open to removing it. But
I have a question for planning and zoning. I guess what was the initial goal with, what was the initial goal of saying we want them to blacktop?
Saying
What
what?
was the initial goal of,
We never.
That's a requirement of the
I
covenants.
know.
Right, that was a covenant requirement, and I think one of the big things was a majority, if not all of the plans for the building plans for parcels in question all stated that they were going to have hard surfaces, blacktops, et cetera, in their initial plans.
Every one of the people who bought property in phase one had to sign a contract saying that they agreed to the covenants. Every one of the people that were sent a letter had signed a contract that they would agree to the covenants, and each of them stated that they had read and would abide by those covenants, and signed a contract. Each of them included paving of parking areas and driveways at the least in their plans, maps and their plans, building plans. And because they had to do that in order to build up there. They had to agree to the covenants. So, you know, originally, I think we had a village admin. I want to say late 80s. And I guess I was in on the establishment of the covenants for phase one. And like I said, in the mid-90s, there was an effort made to get everybody in compliance. And then late 90s, early 2000s, it seems like none of the village administrators were interested in enforcing the rules out there. I live right next to the industrial park. They're good neighbors. I've had conflicts with one or two people, but, you know, I can't complain about them as neighbors. That's just,
Nathan, how many businesses are involved in phase one, roughly, that are affected by this?
I would estimate around 12, 10. The ones that are actually affected with the current issues, three or four.
But all 12 of them should be notified of this because it's their.
They should have been. Like I said, until I double checked that, yeah.
Based off of that and what you just said, that means the other 8 or 9 are in compliance? So,
Well,
so there's 12.
let's be honest, with this section.
Yeah, with that
Because
section, yeah.
I didn't look through every single one to
Yeah.
double check everything. We got one report
Okay.
on one thing. So
Yes.
that one item is what we looked at
Yep.
across the whole thing.
Well, this was the trigger for the whole thing that
Right.
was this, so that's, without actually stating it, I'm inferring to, that I'm talking about this particular part of the town. So the other 8 or 9
Yeah.
have paid.
Right.
So there's 3 or 4 that didn't, and 8 or 9 that did. Okay.
When we had the meeting to discuss this before planning zoning, we saw copies of the letters that had been written by the business owners. They were provided to
Did
us.
see that.
Yes,
Yeah.
we had those in our packet.
They were brought as variances, and the suggestion to the board was to deny the variances. That's how they were brought. And like I've said in the past, the reason you guys weren't contacted is because the planning and zoning typically doesn't have the final say, and that's why we invited the business owners supposedly after that meeting to come to the village board meeting where the final discussion was gonna happen. And I figured at that point, it's up to the board where, you know, I get it. And like I said, I'll take a look and make sure that these were sent out. I was told they were, so I can verify that again. But, and as for Dave Creasel's property, he was sent a letter as well. He had some other issues going on, so the advice to him was to kind of watch, wait and see, and he'll hear back when we have a final say, basically, from those meetings, which were the variances, because if the board was gonna grant the variances and everything, then I'd contact him and tell him to do it. If not, I was gonna contact him and say, hey, this is where we're at. But
And
The
now it
village-
sounds like the whole concept of the variances is a moot point because we
yeah,
can't
because of the
do it
fact
anyway,
that,
so.
yeah, a variance, he's right, is not supposed to go to planning and zoning, it's supposed to go through a separate board that's not appointed, I mean, they're appointed, but it's more judicial.
It just doesn't make sense in this
Right.
context.
So, yeah.
I got to a couple of them. And they said it didn't matter to them if people didn't have their parking lots blacktop. I know the 3 people I did tell them or talk to on it, they said, I blacktopped mine because I wanted it blacktop. Because I asked, I says, did the village at some point tell you you needed to blacktop? And those 3 guys says, I don't know if they did or not,
No.
but I was gonna do it either way because I wanted a blacktop parking lot. So, you know, that's what those 3 told me.
Which 3 businesses were that?
Randy from Infinity, the cabinet shop,
Woodward.
and I believe the Boss Bags, and Hopper Grease Box, which he no longer owns that building. He has sold that. He's, you know, and he did his in sections. He says, when I first built there, I did not pave the whole thing. You know, I did it as I had money to. He says, but I wanted a solid surface parking lot. That was his choice. He says it was my choice to do it, not the village's.
Since we're still in a public hearing, I'm curious if anybody else in the audience has, clearly you've got a vested interest in this for some reason. I'm curious if anybody else has comments that we should hear while we're on the subject.
Well, I'm in phase 2 Augram Explosives, Mary Ellen Augram. And, well, first of all, I always want to say that we are very proud to be in this industrial park. This is a long-term dream, and we've built a really nice building. We have a lot of employees, and it functions beautifully for us. With that being said, we are very concerned with being a good neighbor to the residents around us. We were there first before the Wildlands subdivision. We haven't received any complaints. We have spent a lot of money building up berms because we do have big equipment. Our equipment will turn the pavement, if we would pave, into gravel. The guesstimate is 1 year if it's a really hot summer, 2 years if it's not a hot summer. So, you know, we just keep trying to berm and put up evergreens and reduce any dust that we have. But we do, you know, like grade the gravel constantly. We have the ditch lines all maintained. We have the culverts maintained. So we're just trying to do our best to be a good neighbor. And we do have some fill that I'm gonna get rid of. If anybody wants to use that for free, then take it. They can build up more berms. Because it's gonna get hauled out to somewhere else. But it's hard to do the pavement for us. I mean, we can maybe pave the very front of the building, but really doesn't affect anything because PSI is all gravel too. So.
But phase 2 has its own type of
Right.
governance anyway.
Right, that's what phase 2 is not a part of this is because of the fact that we have no control over it. They can control their covenants as they please at this point. So that's why it was supposed to be kind of more towards phase one this time, and yeah. And everything she said is correct.
And so I think an amendment to those covenants allowing the property owners to hear and make decisions on any exceptions for anything that's going to continue on, would probably be an easy way, well, not an easy way, but one way of handling this.
So
Right,
for
so-
phase two, did you say phase one?
Phase one and phase
Phase-
two, a
Phase
potential amendment, change that word variance to the exceptions to covenants and say, however they want to do it, a majority of the property owners within that phase, a
amendment?
majority of the property owners
I
within
agree.
the entire business
Yeah,
park,
we want it.
and then they can decide what they want to do with the remaining covenants. Now, yeah, of course, when you update, well, your zoning code now and any updates in the future are going to apply to those people. But maybe there's still something or many things within these documents that they want to keep in place. Let them govern them. That would be my suggestion.
In order to do that, we still need a majority.
We
of-
still need them to show
Because
up.
we don't have the authority to just
Right,
modify it
yeah.
with,
Yeah.
yeah. We
Well,
we only have one
we would
vote.
do it through a resolution. They're not
But
voting.
it's still an amendment to the covenants. I think
Right.
that that's gonna require their consent.
Right, so wouldn't that mean basically bringing a resolution without amendment and then passing it out to business owners for signature if they would want?
So does it mean that we should
Oh.
even
Yes,
have
we could
anything
do
to
it
do
that
it
way.
at all? Like, should they not just be getting together and having a meeting to discuss each of these line by line?
Phase two could do that without us
Right.
here.
Phase one could too as well, come together with,
Right,
this is the changes we want to make,
yeah.
and here it
accept
is.
that.
Yes, we have to accept it because they have to provide a copy, but,
Yeah, the purpose of this, my understanding, was just to get everybody in the room to have
Right,
that
right.
conversation.
but I mean, technically, we don't necessarily have to be a part of that conversation of what they're putting together.
Not for
Phase-
phase two at all.
And
Unless
phase
we
one,
just-
we don't only need it coming back to us so we can
Unless we
approve.
just take an amendment that says, that's pulling us out of it and present it to the business owners and allow them to do it.
Yeah, we could do that too.
Good idea.
I think that's a good idea. I think that would solve a lot.
Yeah,
What happens with enforcement of violations then if it's left to them to decide?
it's up to them.
They would have to,
It's just
it'd
like
be
a
like
home one.
any other covenants that a
Yeah,
homeowner has,
constable.
which is court.
So it's gotta be
Yeah,
constable.
so the property owners as a whole could come together, or if there was a property owner that had an issue that they felt was a specific harm for them, for their property, they could seek to enforce it in court personally.
Well, it sounds like we have no problems with the industrial park, right? Like with Gary and Dave Kriesler, everyone seems to be on the same page, the way I take it.
Yeah, there is, my understanding is I have never heard any
I never have either, that's what I'm wondering.
disagreements between any of the landowners on Industrial Park as far as one business owner having a problem with the other one setting up. I have not ever heard of anything, and I don't think the village board has either this village board or prior village boards.
Because as far as dust, you're gonna get dust from the farm up, like you said, up the street there. And there's dust whenever the wind blows, no matter where around
Yeah.
here. We got it up at the park, it's just a ball diamond with the sand, so. To me, it's nothing to complain about, but
Well, I think the reason that, I think if I was to go back, and I would suspect that the reason that the village is part of the covenants is that they have, they're the representation for everybody else. Through court action.
Right, but
Yeah.
even then, we can't force them to follow this, whatever it may be, even in phase one. It's not ours to patrol
Why would
once
you
it's
say
done. Because
It's a contract.
it is a contract, but this is theirs to manage on their own, as long as 2/3 of the people or majority in phase
For
one.
phase two.
I'm not talking about phase two.
Phase one, we are,
But we can't make decisions on it. They can change it if they want, right?
no, they can't.
Not with
Hold
the,
on,
No,
hold on,
we-
hold on. With phase one, we can't amend the covenants without a majority of the property owners.
And neither can they.
There are different
Agreed.
enforcement mechanisms, but that would require court action. And a violation, I mean, it would be no different from any other, homeowners association seeking to enforce a covenant. A violation, if that was accepted by the court, could potentially become a lien against the property. But I see your point. I just don't think it's any different than any other business park. I mean, typically.
No, I don't. I just wanted to make sure that we talk through it and we understand that. So from my perspective, looking at it, the way that phase two is written was that the idea is that, okay, so as long as we're still developing phase two, the village board still has a say in the covenants and enforcement of those. They have an avenue for enforcement if something isn't done. Now, once the entire subdivision's been, or the entire phase of the industrial park has been completed, then the village board becomes removed from that because ideally everybody is already in compliance with the agreement and everything is done. Phase one wasn't written that way. It was never written for us to be taken out. But I understand the difference between the two. And I don't have a problem with doing it. I just want to make sure that we all understand that removes us completely, and it removes the village residents any residential concerns as well, other than a violation of some zoning or ordinance that we have that's outside of that.
we don't have anything currently, but realistically, that's gonna be a stronger avenue is through ordinance.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be a lot more visible for anyone coming in. That's why I suggest that if there's things that you guys like in the covenants, that we look at putting them into the ordinance. And if we pull ourselves out, and they approve it, then it's up to them if they wanna continue it, if they wanna end it completely, but then we still have our ordinances from when they're created. It would be that going forward from when it was created. So it would have no effect pretty much on the current businesses, other than potential new businesses, and depending on what we do with the ordinances, like zoning, so.
Because they would potentially be grandfathered.
Right.
So my suggestion would be that you draw up a proposed change to the covenant for phase one, bring it to the board. And does it have to go through planning and zoning too? No.
Well,
just goes to the
actually,
board?
Before you do that, we should probably close the public hearing, because
well-
then the next one is discussion
Yes,
of what
ma'am.
we want to do.
Yeah, well, it's still public, I can talk about it.
Yeah.
Because if somebody has a if that's all right, that's all right. I mean, you know, I like the idea that I think we could get out of that. I think that if we, but it's still gonna require all of your neighbors to.
It requires at least 50%.
At least 50%.
And that's not gonna be a
50% or
problem.
more. Well,
Thompson Metals owns a lot of property over there.
By
Is
land.
it by land?
Yes.
It's
Okay.
by, yes, it's not by, it's by square footage.
I still would
And you know what?
encourage.
I don't think,
That's two separate.
I don't know of anybody on phase one of Industrial Park Drive that wants to cause troubles.
Yeah.
And I don't see, from the business owners I know over there, they don't wanna irritate their neighbors. You know, Thompson Metals, they went through a couple things when the business park was originally put in. You know, we put the berm, before my time, put the berm along the property, and there were some trees planted and stuff like that to just try and make it a little more aesthetically nice for their neighbors. You know, they did that stuff. And like, you know, Mike said on the original meeting, you know, now it's, you know, we've done this stuff, and now we're back here again, and they want more. When is enough gonna be enough? You know, we're trying to be good neighbors. I mean, there could be a lot. I put up with dust long before I put up with noise. I think it's a pretty quiet and industrial park there.
Only when, not when work gets out,
Not one what?
not when they're out of work, they're in a hurry.
There are some people that could invest in mufflers. I'm not gonna bullshit you.
Yeah.
You know, trust me, I've yelled at my.
There was a
Certain
lot of
people
hours
in-
put in that to get this industrial park going, and people don't realize now you're trying to like push on them, and they're the same people that we got in there when we started. They're still there.
And
give
this
them
is
a-
something for the village too. I
Yeah,
mean, obviously, this is a huge learning thing for the village of Hortonville. Phase one, phase two, phase three next time, which, you know, we're all hoping there's gonna be more. Because, you know, businesses don't come with kids that have to go to school. You know, we're gonna tweak these rules, and we're gonna make them right for the third, you know, and enforce them, so. I'm sorry I interrupted.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Call my name. We live on Spruce Street, and I'm gonna be honest, way back when that was proposed, we weren't excited at all. And I wouldn't trade the industrial park for my backyard neighbor with anything else. We have the privacy evenings and weekends that you guys don't have, you know? They're not, oh, you have privacy? Oh, yeah. You got people dying to get near you. It's just, you know, we're used to cornfields, sunflower fields and all that, so we weren't excited about it, but it really has been nice to have them there. Like I said, I know when Thompson Metals gets out at 3 o'clock, by the way, because it's quiet and we have privacy in our own backyard.
It's better than somebody else's backyard.
Yeah, I don't think we could move to a place and have backyard neighbors because we've never had it. I like this. You too don't have backyard neighbors.
The only thing I added to Gary's point too, this just puts the board and the committees in kind of a tough position.
Yeah, I understand that you guys, you know,
And to clean that up, I guess,
Yeah.
more than anything, is kind of a goal, so.
yeah, and, you know, I for one am thankful for, you know, the Village of Hortonville Board. You know, I lived in the town of Greenfield, you know, for years. It's a thankless job. Because you're not gonna make everybody happy, and for the little bit of money you guys make and the time you put into this, you know, I for one am very thankful for what you guys do and the headaches that you have to put up with for the minimal amount of pay you get out of it.
Well, and I'd like to address that a little bit because, you know, you did say at one point that, you know, what took so long for us or whomever to address this, and why is no one talked to you in 2011 or 2014? And I think that we all need to remember, one, we were addressed by a member of the village that had concerns, and so it is our job to address and deal with that. So of course it's going to come up then, right?
Yes.
Second is, I mean, because we have to be stewards for everybody. Second is, we have had massive, this board has changed numerous times over that point. The administrators have changed over that point. The legal staff has changed over that point. So sometimes you have inconsistencies and you have things that certain people focus on and other people don't. And so right now, I know a big thing for this, as long as I've been on the board, has been going through ordinances and cleaning those up and getting things kind of ticked and tied and catching things up to where they should be, because some of them have been ignored for a while, right? So sometimes things do come up that have been dormant and should have probably been addressed. But I just want to make it very clear that although your concern is understood, that sometimes these things come up because, one, we have to address any member of the village that has a concern,
I
and
understand
two,
that.
we have a lot of transition, especially in the 40 years I've lived here. I've seen many, many changes across this whole thing. So I just want to make sure that
Yes, I do understand that.
that those things are
And that was brought up by Nathan in the first place, you know, how did we get here? And they said they had a complaint and they needed to act on it.
right.
I do understand that.
Okay. I just want to make sure that whoever that person was, which no one knows, I don't know, but I just want to make sure that they feel that they've been heard too.
Are we good with the public hearing, or is there more?
I'll move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, we'll go to 4, and we will do a discussion and possible action on the protective covenants for the Hortonville Business Park.
So I'm going to say this even though it's not the popular thing. As a matter of principle, I think that the contracts were written, and I still struggle with the contracts not being fulfilled and followed, and their obligations not being fulfilled. So I think that's why this has been such a laborious project here, or undertaking. But with that being said, there's a reason that I think that there was the ability written in to modify, because there are situations that change over time. And sometimes we have to be a little flexible, which is why my recommendation is that Nathan follow through with drawing up a change to the covenant.
Anyone have any other suggestions?
I feel confused. I feel like we just arrived at that we had no business.
What did you say?
I'm confused by what you're saying. I thought we just arrived at we don't have any.
Only in phase 2. Phase 1 we do.
Phase 1, we do not have the authority to change it on our own, and neither do the industrial park residents.
Without
Phase
us.
It takes
So
us
we would
and
like to
half of them.
remove ourselves from the situation.
We can't even
From
remove
the
ourselves.
situation.
We
Without
don't have
them.
the authority to do that.
But we can draw up a resolution to remove ourselves and present it to them for signature.
So
And
that it matches phase 2.
more than 50% of the landowners agreed, then we're out of the,
And then it sort of more mimics phase 2.
then it's on
That's
them to
exactly
kind of handle
right,
it
yeah.
going forward, and we get pulled out of it.
And we would only have to cover ourselves with ordinances to protect ourselves
Yes.
from some things that are
Yes.
in here that we would not want anyways.
Thanks.
And I
Is
think
everybody
if
clear?
you guys wanted to have, even though they don't necessarily need our approval to amend for phase 2, we could draft the resolution in a way that says phase 1 and phase two were okay with being removed, and maybe suggest some language that they could use to modify these covenants. And that could be passed around on their end too. I mean, I don't think that would be a big job to draft it that way. If they get the signatures for phase two, they do. If they don't, that's, you know, that's fine, but I think there's probably a one size fits all.
It's not a bad idea, because I think we're still enforcers of phase two, even though we have no control over what's in it. So that's a little weird. They can use us to enforce against each other, which is, yeah. So.
I think we could come up with something that accomplishes that for both phases.
Do you want a motion on that?
We didn't.
Okay.
Did we do this?
Are we done discussing?
I have one more question. Whatever is come up with, is it going to be for the future too?
What do you mean?
If there was a phase three?
If there was a, I mean, I guess,
Well, phase three wouldn't be covered by either of these
Right.
documents.
But you'd hope that you'd establish it in a way that would be able to be used similarly for phase three, right? I mean, you
Well, yes and
if
no.
you need.
So
because that's the problem we have right
when
now,
there's
right?
when there's a big subdivision that comes in, right, that developer is typically going to establish a homeowners association, and they're gonna have covenants that look like this. And once they have transferred all of those lots, then there will be some other entity in charge of anything that remains, a homeowners association, the residents individually, whatever.
I get that, my mom's the one
So,
first.
well, yeah, no, and I'm not trying to speak down, I'm just kind of like backing up on it. So if the village were to develop another business park, I don't think that this would be a great template.
No,
for
what
us
I'm
to
saying is
decide.
if we create, if we want to try to leave it as open, I would argue, or by doing this, we're doing kind of, our hope would be doing the same thing for the third one if we did it right, so that we're not,
When we're done
Stuck,
with it,
yeah.
that it goes to them.
yeah,
Right.
so that we're
Or
not
maybe we
policing
don't
it.
even have anything
Right,
like
maybe we
this.
just follow our ordinance.
If our ordinances are set up
Why
right,
have
we
it?
probably don't need it.
True.
It's a hypothetical. Thank you.
Is there a phase three coming?
I don't know. Start drafting.
Probably.
Any more discussion? Otherwise, I would need a motion then.
How would you, what would you like? Just to direct Nathan? Is that right? Okay. I'll make a motion to direct staff to draw up a proposal removing the village of Hortonville from the phase one and phase two covenants, and present that back to the board with the intent of, after approval, going to the residents of the industrial park.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Number 5, I would need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are now adjourned at 6:58. Are we going ahead with the next?
We gotta open and close. So we're gonna open it, close it, and leave. 2 minutes, a minute.
The second one?
It'll be the quickest meeting you've had.
Okay. For planning and zoning. We have a second one for planning and zoning.
Yeah, they're gonna talk about it.
Okay.
Okay.
So we will call to order Planning and Zoning Commission for August 8th, 2024. You just want a motion to close it then?
Yeah, we don't have anything to discuss at this time.
Okay,
Just discussion of accessory buildings is all that was listed, so there were no actions to be taken.
so then I would need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second group.
Roger.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Wish I had a vote. I wanted to hear the discussion on the utility.
6:59.
Come back another time, I guess.
Wow.